If you are of a certain age, you probably think nothing of using the phrase hang up the phone, despite the fact that you probably have a mobile phone rather than a handset that needs to be hung up at the end of a phone call. We now end the call, and yet the phrase hang up the phone persists. Or how about telling someone that they sound like a broken record? Have you added a CC or a carbon copy to someone via email? You probably think nothing of using these words and phrases with origins beyond the personal understanding of someone who has not actually hung up a call, or actually heard a needle skip on a record, or had to use carbon paper to get a triplicate form over to HQ. But this is the natural progression of language. And we innocently enter the comfort of these words as we look into the eyes of our friends, family, neighbors, and strangers, as we accept from them the intended meaning. And we expect from others in return that they too will accept our use of this language in kind. It has been 54 years since the words Memorial Day were inscribed into law in 1971, as the name given to the holiday to remember those who have fought and died in military service. To give us a common perspective on those 54 years, note that 54 years before 1971 was 1917, which was the year that the United States entered the First World War. So we are as far today from the advent of the name Memorial Day as the advent of the name Memorial Day was when the U.S. entered World War I. Before 1971, it was formerly called Decoration Day. I would imagine if you ping some random person on social media and ask them to define the phrase Decoration Day, they might not really have any idea what you meant. Perhaps in ambivalence, they would quickly scan through their memory for a time to decorate, perhaps for Christmas or a child's birthday, or maybe they would associate it with heading over to the local Stuff Mart to pick up some new throw pillows and a wall clock. Decoration in the modern sense might be to some a word that speaks of festive attitude, social interaction, and laughter. However, since you are here with me right now in this cemetery on this, the morning of Memorial Day, I know that you have a better understanding of what these modern words mean. You know they speak of remembrance. But let's go further back. What drives an entire nation to decide to decorate in this, our context today? Decorating the graves of fallen warriors is not a modern invention, nor is it an American invention, but in that respect, we didn't go beyond our national memory. Let's also acknowledge the human experience of loss. We cannot adequately grieve unless we first love. And the proportion of grief is often commensurate with the proportion of that love. The physician Luke documented a conversation between Jesus and his disciple Peter, in which Jesus told Peter, quote, "To whom much is given, much is required." Jesus said this regarding the meaning of a parable about who was the faithful and sensible manager of a household. To whom much is given, much is required. To a manager given many resources, that manager must accomplish many things. True enough. But then Jesus added to his statement. He said, quote, "To whom much is given, much is required, and even more will be expected of the one who has been entrusted with more." Even more will be expected of managers when they have already been faithful and sensible with what they have already been given, because they will be given more. If you have any familiarity with this exchange between Jesus and Peter in the 12th chapter of the book of Luke in the Christian Bible, then you probably have almost always nodded in silent agreement, considering and contemplating that the admonition that people who have been given a lot of things, money, resources, talents, that these people need to be responsible for those things. But perhaps the meaning is richer. Its tenor is stronger, and the promise of this parable makes with its words is far more incisive than that. So why Decoration Day? Why was a nation strangely united such that a national conscience would conclude that decoration could be its common name? What could drive a people to unify around this singular idea? In an order of magnitude closer to one's own heart, your presence here today is very personal, and it's not really motivated from a national perspective. You're here today because you remember, or perhaps more accurately, because you have chosen to remember. At some point, you too were given much. Maybe an uncle, a father, a brother, a friend, or some distant relative twice removed somewhere over on your mother's side that hardly anybody ever knew, but you do. You were given much. You were blessed with their hope, their dream, their desires, and their laughter. We, in turn, were blessed with much. Our hope, our dream, our freedom, and our laughter. If you were not given much, if they did not give much, if we did not lose much, if nothing was actually required, then the point is lost, and the words no longer hold their meaning. And therefore, outside these grounds, perhaps generally it is not likely that when someone speaks of this holiday, that they are recalling exactly what the words Memorial Day originally meant. From the American tradition, or more correctly from the pointedly specific United States tradition, Decoration Day, Memorial Day, was birthed in unity from the heart of a divided nation, a nation of the broken unity of the American Civil War. Roughly 700,000 soldiers died in that war. That was about 2% of the U.S. population at the time. If 2% does not sound like a lot, consider that the population of the United States today is about 332 million people. So 2% of that would be nearly 6.5 million. The population of Minnesota is currently less than 6 million people. So it was as if an entire state vanished onto a violent, miserable death. The loss our nation experienced at the national level was enormous. Decoration Day, from the perspective of the United States, was birthed from the great trauma of her loss, her grief. In turn, it was a loss and a grief that was commensurate with what she had given and how much had been required of her. But Decoration Day was not birthed because anyone said so from a national stage, but because individual people responded of their own accord and began to do it in remembrance of the great loss. They came to the battlefield in their backyard to hastily bury and then formally rebury an uncle, a father, a brother, a friend, and some distant relative twice removed over on your mother's side that hardly anybody ever knew. It was intensely personal. The remembrance was great because their loss was great, like your loss is great. So they decorated the graves of family and the graves of strangers. 24 years ago, in his book on the legacy of the Civil War, Yale professor Dave Blight wrote about an extraordinary event that occurred on May 1st, 1865, documented at the time in two newspapers, one in New York and one in South Carolina. 2.5 months after the surrender of Charleston to Union forces, 10,000 freed black residents held a parade in Charleston, South Carolina, to honor over 250 dead Union soldiers who had been tossed in hasty, unmarked graves behind the grandstands at a local horse track. The newly freed peoples undertook the difficult task to unearth these 250 Union soldiers, piled together, and provide them with a proper burial in separate graves. And then they honored each grave, decorating them with flowers. Those 10,000 people knew what the price had been. Across northern and southern cemeteries, people felt moved to honor the fallen soldiers and to note the grief of others, other families, by decorating the graves of all soldiers, even decorating the graves of the people that had taken the life of their loved one. They felt the grief of even their enemy. It was these acts of grace, forgiveness, and mercy for the dead and for the living, the actions of a demonstrative people who remembered how much they had been given, and therefore how much had been required and lost, that eventually led to the national and collective groundswells of calls for remembrance, to formally set aside a special national day to decorate all the graves of these fallen soldiers, and hence why, in response, it was called Decoration Day from 1868 to 1971. We are present in this specific cemetery on this specific day, united to this specific purpose, Because over 160 years ago, decorating graves was the urgent response of a nation of broken hearts. And this cultural expression of personal grief was given its name, Decoration Day. And now for 54 years, officially under the more modern words, Memorial Day. The meaning is in my mind, and the meaning is now in your mind, even when some words no longer seemingly represent exactly what they once did. These words were given their meaning by those who came before us as a cultural investment in remembrance. Like the manager of Jesus' parable, who had the situational awareness to understand that he would be called into account, to be both sensible and faithful with what he had been entrusted. So today we recognize why you are here, because of how much has been required of you. And not to get hung up or to sound like a carbon copy of a broken record, but since our loved ones, our neighbors, our friends, and strangers to us have with their very lives entrusted to us the same beyond measure, I will choose this day to join you and you to join me, who with the same thanks, forgiveness, grace, and mercy observe this Memorial Day, this memorial remembrance. Thank you.